denounce the ways of walking in truth, which you have to understand this is a lifestyle, not a religion. So what they had to do was denounce their way of life in order to become a part of a religious system. And so what Constantine did was he made them denounce and basically say that they would never keep the feast, they would never keep the Shabbat, and they would never follow the instructions and guidelines of Abba Yahuwah. And so, and if they chose to go back into truth, that they would be called anathema. In other words, they would be cursed, and that the roof of their tongue would stick to their mouths, and they would basically die. So this was one of the things that was pronounced upon our people if they walked into that, saw that it wasn't right, and desired to leave out. And if they did walk into it, they had to change their whole lifestyle. They had to stop keeping the feast and start keeping traditional holidays, which are steeped in idolatry, yes, worship of powers, and such. And so they would have to celebrate Christmas, celebrate Easter, celebrate Thanksgiving, celebrate Valentine's Day, any of the rest of these days that you find on the Gregorian calendar. And they would have to substitute those feasts or those holidays for the true feast. The feast of the feast, which is Shabbat, is a feast. It is a time of celebration. Then they had to Peshat and Shuvat, and then tabernacles. So they would have to forfeit those. They would have to not celebrate those anymore. And so, and then Yom Atonement, the Day of Atonement. Right. They would have to basically denounce those things. And anybody that has ever been in Christianity understands when you walk into the setting of Christianity, or you were born in it, you understand from the time you come to understand that system. They're telling you, if you read it in the writings and you basically not so much stumble upon it, but read it, the first thing they tell you is, we are no longer under that rule. We no longer do that. So they basically snatch it away from you before you have time to truly get an understanding of these things. And so this is what they do. And so with that being said, it is important that we understand his logic to why he did what he did. Now, the problem comes in is that you cannot, two wrongs do not make a right. And him changing it or trying to keep them from understanding certain things did not make it easy, because now our people, or some of them, are in a state of confusion. So once again, when Christianity encouraged not only persecution, but even the death of the children. And so he wanted to safeguard his people from theological attack. In other words, he wanted to keep the people from being attacked, from answering questions about the divine one. Now you have to understand, when people get to talk about the divine one, we know what his name is, because he told us his name. He told us his name in Tibetan. Right. When he spoke unto the children of Yasharal, I believe it's in chapter 19, and he said, remember, I am Yahuwah thy Savior. He didn't come with I am the divine one. He specifically spoke to them as his people. And so he gave them his name. And so he wanted to keep them out of that. But in doing so, he rewrote history in a bad way. Are y'all following me?
Yes. Yes.
Rabbi Yosef ben Kaspi, 1280 to 1340 CE, like Rashi, wanted to change the accepted interpretation of Yashaya 53 to combat the Christian witness. He warned the rabbis that those who expounded this section of the Mashiach give occasion to the heretics, Christians, to interpret it of Jesus. Now you have to understand, we know that it is not about Jesus, because Jesus is a figurehead to a system that Constantine created.
Yes.
There is nowhere that you ever record in the beginning and in the original writings about a Jesus Christ, because J is only 500 years old.
God.
But we do find the lifestyle of Yahush HaMashiach. And so you have to understand, there is a war going on here. You're trying to keep the people in truth, and at the same time, you don't want to put more stuff out there so the people that are evasive and they are doing these things can continue to pull our people outside of truth. So on one hand, you can see, but on the other hand, I have to disagree because what he did was wrong.
Right.
And once again, trying to change a system, that's the same thing that the rabbis did when they were in the Babylonian captivity. When they were, when our people were laughed at and made fun of, they called them um, uh, 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 Yahoos. Yes, Yahoos. And so, because the rabbi said, well, his name is too precious and his name is too sacred for us to allow people to defame and talk ill about his name, we will just change it and we will not say it. Well, over the course of time, they forgot the name. Now, I don't care how long it is, when people forget a name, it is because there is no relationship. Have you ever noticed when, no matter how old you are or how mature you are, people that you've known even when you were in kindergarten, elementary, high school, whatever it was, when you have a relationship with them people, you never forget those names. You may not recognize the face, but you never forget a name. The reason why we forget names is because we have no relationship with the person that carries that name. So when they forgot the name of Yahuwah, it is not because his name was so hard to remember. It is because there was no genuine connection and no genuine relationship. And this is why you have them writing the capital G-D. Because when they forgot, they, in other words, their forgetting is not because they stopped saying it. Their forgetting is because they stopped serving him.
Right.
And began to serve other powers and began to serve other mighty ones. And so this is why it's important that we understand relationship.
That's right.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Relationship is so important because no matter how far away you are from a person, no matter how you don't speak to a person, if you have genuine relationship, you never forget that person's name. You may forget their face, but you will never forget their name. And so as such, they wanted to basically keep them at bay. In response to this, Rabbi Sadi Ibn Dana in the 1500s observed, "May Yahuwah forgive him for not having spoken the truth." No, now, although Rashi and others had sincere intentions, they were wrong. Because when you get to messing with foundational scriptures that help us to outline and trace the life of Yahush, you have just brought about a lifetime worth of confusion. And this is why many of our people today constantly are being combating this and fighting among ourselves, because many believe in the collective theory and many of us believe in the individual theory that he was the son of Yahush, or that he is the son of Yahuwah. I'm sorry, that Yahush is the son of Yahuwah. And so with that being said, we're going to look on a little further at those that supported this theory, subsequent witnesses. Once again, Rashi was one who believed wholeheartedly, and it was just one man. And when he came on the scene, he changed the order of truth. One man. One man. This is why we have to be careful. People say, "Oh, they ain't got no power. They can't do nothing." Don't ever underestimate a person that has a goal. Because no matter how long it takes and no matter what it takes, if that person has a goal and that goal is to change something, they are going to succeed.
Right.
And he succeeded in what he started out to do. So these are some of the subsequent witnesses, Ibn Ezra, CA 1150 of Ibn Ezra. Throughout his interpretation of Yashiyah 53, he relates the personality and experiences of the suffering servant to either an individual Ibram in exile, or more emphatically to the entire people, Yasharal, in exile. He specifically identifies the servant as each individual belonging to Yasharal, and subsequently Yahuwah's servant, who is in context. At the same time, he attempts to discount the Mashiach interpretation. What is the Mashiach interpretation? That is when we read Yashiyah 53. Who has believed our report, and to whom is the arm of Yahuwah revealed? That he is speaking of Yahush and not Yasharal. So you have to understand when they play that play on words and they move different renderings or different words to make it sound and allude to that the children of Yasharal are being spoken of when it is not so. Now, by de-emphasizing his preferred understanding of the servant as an individual, a concept that is essential for Christian exegesis. Now, mind you, these are not people that in the beginning were saying Yasharal. These were people that were emphatically believing and stating without hesitation that Yahush was being spoken of in Yashayah 53, 52, 49, and even chapter 50. They understood this, but the more they talked with Rashi and those that would be witnesses to this, the more their opinion and the more their confession began to change. And it ended up in our mainstream commentaries. It became mainstream in our writings. And so this is why we have this now. Once again, it's important, as I said, when you're building a house, you have to have the beams in there. You have to have a foundation, and he had a foundation. And those people built upon it, and they did these things.
That's right.
You have Yosef Ibn Albo, ca. 1400. In commentating, I'm sorry, let me go back and read this. By de-emphasizing his preferred understanding of the servant as an individual, a concept that is essential for Christian exegesis, and by stressing the collective interpretation, Ibn Ezra appears to be negating the Christology or Christological meaning of the passage to which he first alludes. This is another example of the tendency to avoid or de-emphasize certain interpretations of Yashayah 53. So as not to lend any credence to the Christian understanding of the prophecy. You have to understand, if you're trying to evade a person, or if you're trying to keep a person from following certain things or understanding, that's not the time to start messing with foundation. That's not the time. The time is to basically do what you have to do. And once it's put out there, then Yahuwah is going to bring about the rest. Now, once again, Yosef Albo, ca. 1400, in commenting on Yashayah 52 and 13, Albo notes that it is all to be referred to Yasserah, who is here called my servant. Consequently, it appears that Albo understands that only a righteous portion of Yasserah suffers for the whole. He states, misfortunes light upon the righteous, not as a punishment, but for the sake of a whole nation. Sounds like a lot of people when you get to hearing and seeing stuff on these social medias. Yes. The atonement may be made for it. Thus, he allowed for a modification in the collective interpretation, which made the servant a righteous portion of the nation. So as it continues to move on, you're seeing gradually changes taking place. He said, no, it's not all of Yasharah, it's just a portion. Like you hear today. Well, it's a portion of us. You don't understand what I go through. You don't understand what I face. You don't understand what all of us face. If we're walking in truth and we are declaring and we are speaking it and we are confessing that we are the children of Yasharal and we are following and we are holding fast to everything that he has shown us and regarded unto us as a people, a set apart people, you are going to face challenges. Yes. You're going to be criticized. You're going to be ostracized. You're going to be called crazy. Mm-hmm. You're going to have people that will like you one day and dislike you the next day. You will have people that will agree with you as long as you play their game. But the moment you begin to separate yourself and say, no, that's not talking about us. Don't give me credit for something I couldn't do. Right. That credit belongs to Yahush HaMashiach. Right. And so it's going to cause friction. And so we got to be prepared for the friction. We got to be prepared for those that will come out at you like a pit bull. Those that will come at you like a dog or whatever. They're going to come at you because, why? Because when you begin to declare truth, they're going to fight you. They're going to fight you. Are you following me? Yes. You have to understand this path is straight and narrow. You can't be on both sides. You cannot straddle the fence. You cannot say in one breath that I am a Christian and in the next breath that I am a Hebrew. Right. It diametrically opposes the truth. How can you say you are a Christian when you know the creed that is based and steeped in Christianity? Well, we don't do that. It does not matter. That's just like you would not accept a Ku Klux Klansman saying, I am a Ku Klux Klansman and I go to the rallies, but I am not a racist. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
Ayahab, you black people. First of all, I'm not a black person.
Mm-hmm.
Are y'all following me? I may be chocolate, but I ain't no black person. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
So we cannot set and agree with that, because when you set in agreement with these things, this is where we have problems. It births problems. It breeds problems. Because you cannot be both. You can only be one. And it's important that we understand these things. Now, listen what. After identifying the servant as Yahshua, Albo does not clarify whether the atonement which was afforded by the suffering servant is due to the sufferings of the entire people of Yahshua, as a righteous collective or as a group of righteous within Yahshua. And when you start seeing this is where you have to really start seeing stuff. And Ayahab, my brothers, and I would never take anything from them, because I know of some great, awesome ox that are steadfast in their belief, and they are not wishy-washy, and they are not they are not biased. They are not those that disrespect women. But when you start looking at the mindset of Rashi and some of the others, excuse me, y'all, but don't you see where you can see discrepancy?
Yes.
If it's only a selected few, who do you think is going to be selected, and who do you think the blame is going to be placed upon? Well, if we are the righteous, now follow my wording, if we are the righteous, then we go all the way back to in the beginning. Who is it that messed up? Who is the one that caused sin to enter in? Well, we know it was Hadam. But you would have those that would disagree and say it was Hawa, because she is the one who ate. Yes, she ate first, but he ate second, which opened the door for sin to enter in. So when you begin to follow this line of theory, you can't help but understand to a degree why you have the fussing and the bickering, and the brothers saying, well, we are the righteous and the sisters are not, and this is why we suffer because of them. Can y'all see what I'm saying?
Yes.
You can really kind of see this. Why? Because you start looking at, well, if you start dividing and saying, now once again, this is taking it out of its proper context and being Yahush and not the children of Yahshua. But if a person accepted that, this is why many times the mindset is, well, it's the women that are here that have made it this way. And it's only a handful of us brothers that's fighting to keep this thing alive and fighting to maintain the uprightness of Yahuwah. You see these in the comments. You see them in the mentality of many of people. I didn't say all. Because like I say, we truly do have some phenomenal ox out there. We don't know brothers out there that have no problem and no issue with the occulting. They protect them. They see them, people coming and being dumb, they automatically on it. They rushing to that place to defend and to set a standard and say, look, don't come on here with this. So we have to understand the balance, but you also have to understand where a lot of this mindset comes from as well.
Yes.
Now, Abraham, which was another witness, Abraham Pharisee, CA 1500. Pharisee argued in esteem of the collective national interpretation. Once again, this is the medieval time, and this is where we are seeing the witnesses. This is what we call the subsequent witnesses that will witness or try to support the theory or support the way of Rashi. Now, mind you, once again, these are those that were already walking in truth, and these were held to the individualistic theory, but began to change their confession to collective. Now, that Yahshua did not warrant such suffering, and that the Ibram suffered for the sake of the nations. bearing the punishment due to the Gentiles for their transgressions. He makes the following comment at the beginning of his commentary on Yashayah 52, which clearly presents a collective view. Now remember, his commentary. So this is one who was a scholar. He is one who was in a position like Rashi to write commentaries. So in his commentary, if you run across these commentaries, you understand where they get their mentality from. He said, I have found others who apply it confidently to the King Mashiach, an opinion shared by our rabbis in the Midrash. Now remember what Midrash is. Let me remind you what Midrash is. And I want to come back because it's important that we understand these. And the reason why I want to bring these this out because it helps us to understand in our study. Rabbinical literature called Midrash is opinions of or authoritative rabbis. Authoritative. Right? Authoritative.
Yes.
Authoritative rabbis. Okay. Whose concern is correctively expounding portions of scripture. Since these are opinion, they are non-binding. However, the overwhelming conclusion of these midrashim is that the suffering servant is the Mashiach. Note the following sampling of quotes. Now, once again, this is important that we understand because in the beginning, these are the same ones that supported the individualistic theory. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
Once again, what is Midrash? Rabbinic literature called Midrash is opinions and authoritative rabbis whose concern is correctly expounding portions of scripture, just portions. Not all, but just portions. So when you hear that, once again, it's important that we put the two together. Now, we shall ourselves, however, with no less confidence, suppose, now remember, he's speaking in his commentary. He's speaking to those that will read it. With no less confidence, suppose that it refers properly to the congregation of Yasharal. Are y'all hearing?
Yes.
Which the prophet addresses by the term servant, and the singular number, exactly as we find him doing by habit and preference in many of his previous prophecies. So once again, if you really see how they collaborated to bring forth this theory so that it would be etched in stone, and by being etched in writing or stone, it would begin to be etched in our hearts and in our minds. Now, once again, when you deal with people that are hardcore, in other words, those that say it doesn't matter what you say and how you say it, we don't believe that because the writings tell us, but understand once again, where did the theory come from? You must remember what time frame did all this take place. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
Let's look back at the time frame in which this took place. This took place during the Middle Ages. This is during the medieval period. Are y'all hearing me?
Yes.
So when you look at that time, medieval period, around 1100, 1400, 1150, then you get to the 1400s, and so in 1500s, 1600s. Now you have to understand, during this time is when this began to take place, and the longer they promoted it, the more stronger and the more convinced that the people were to holding on to this theory. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
Very important. Now, once again, now this is Isaac ben Abraham, ca. 1550. Now, once again, this is during the medieval times, and these are the people that were the subsequent witnesses to what Rashi brought about. All right. Now, Isaac ben Abraham of Troki sought to demonstrate that the prophets often called the Ibram people Yahuwah's servant, and that the Isaianic references to the servant's illness can be understood as allusions to Yasharal's suffering in exile. You see how things are changed. You see how people will modify things to make it fit their theory. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
just like this. People would say, "Ooh, leather shoes. You have to break leather shoes in." No, you don't. You buy the right size. You ain't got to worry about that. But that's what people believe. Why? Because they say, well, leather stretches, it expands, and it shrinks. If you buy the right size, it doesn't matter how many times it expands or shrinks, it's going to fit. If you know you wear a size 10 and a half or 11 and you trying to buy a 9 and a half, you know your foot gonna be screaming in there.
Yes.
Even a 10, if you know you wear a 10 and a half, a 10 is still going to be too small. Well, it's a snug fit, it'll stretch. No, it does not expand. But people will come up with those type of arguments to try to prove their point. Well, my shoes are too small, or they're tight. Well, just admit they're too small. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
And so this is what they did. They basically came up with this theory. You know, that this when our people were in exile, because remember our people were in exile more than one time. Now, in his somewhat extensive comments on Yashaya 52 and 13, Isaac essentially offers a polemic against the Nazarene sect and their Christological interpretation. In opposition to a Messianic understanding, Isaac presents the nation of Yasharal as the servant. Once again, remember their fight is against who? The Christians. Their fight is to maintain that Yahush that it's all about Yasharal. But in the same time, they strip Yahush of his position as being the servant and being the one to bring us into truth and promoting Yasharal in that place when Yasharal could not do it. Couldn't do it. But they promoted themselves in that place once again because they wanted to warrant and wanted to be able to deflect theological attacks against their belief. So when you get into stuff like this and you start altering and changing like many people do, this is how confusion hits the table, and this is how a lot of people end up being misled. A lot of people being misled. Now, listen, it says, now, in opposition to a Mashiach understanding, Isaac presents the nation of Yashua as the servant. The truth is the whole parasha down to 30 and 12 was spoken prophetically to Yashua with reference to the people of Yashua who were enduring the yoke of exile and who are called my servant in the singular as frequently elsewhere. Now, once again, that even goes against grammar. Because if you are speaking of a people, even though we say we as a nation are one, we understand that that is a description of us. But we will still be plural and not singular. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
And this is what they did. They broke a rule in order to try to create something to keep our people and to keep Christianity at bay and keep our people in a position basically to always be above, which was wrong. Are you following me? Because when Yahuwah puts you in a place, nobody can take you down but him. This is why when man begins to go into his laboratory, and when I say man, I'm talking about even women. When you go into that place and you begin to scheme and dream, and you go into your lab and you go in there and you start setting up things and you start trying to figure out ways to do certain things, if you are not led by the Ruach HaKodesh, you're going to bring about trouble. Right. What you are trying to change and trying to help, you turn around and create a worse thing, a worse situation. Remember, we are not Yahuwah. He is mindful and know what's being done. The best thing to do is continue to warn and keep our people in a place of knowledge and continue to refute what other people try to say. Well, Jesus is black. He could be green. He's still not the Mashiach. Are you following me?
Yes.
What are we going to debate for? I heard someone say, well, it's the same thing. No, it is not. You're talking about two different people. One, you're talking about a person, and then next you're talking about a figurehead. Because if you look through history, there was no Jesus. That's why they had to use Caesar Borgia, because when Constantine came up with this system, they had to put a figure, they had to put a face to it. Yahush has been and will continue throughout the writings. We can research his beginning from the beginning of time, even after, before time, infinity. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
Important for us to understand. So, infinity, eternity, time, infinity, and eternity, or time, eternity, and infinity. We can research him because he has been spoken of. Are you following me?
Yes.
And Yahuwah, he is the one that endorses him. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
And this is why we can't accept when people say, well, you know, when you talk about Jesus Christ, you're talking about the Mashiach, you're still talking about Yahush. No, we're not. You're talking about two different people. Are you following me?
Yes.
And this is why it is important that we understand that and we take that stand. Because if you continue to follow in that line, then you're no better than Rashid, because that's the purpose that's why Rashid did what he did, was to keep our people from doing what some of them are doing now. And they are trying to merge the two. Well, the two systems. You have one that is a religion and one that is a lifestyle. As Hebrews, this is our lifestyle. Christianity is a religion. Look it up. It is a religion that was created by man. So it's important that we understand these things. Now, Manasseh ben Yasharal, or Israel, ca. 1600. Although not technically part of the medieval witnesses, Manasseh provides a competent summary of the medieval collective view in the work Reconciliation, a commentary on Yashayah 13 through chapter 53 and verse 12. His position and method are quickly evident in his paraphrase of the passage. He renders the first two verses as follows. Now remember now, this is commentary. And anytime we as a people find stuff in commentaries, we find it in books. Unless we have proof, and even when we have proof, you're still going to have a fight on your hands. But we tend to take stuff at face value when we find it in a book. And this theory and this way can be found in commentaries. In the beginning, when I began to walk in truth, one of the things that Yahuwah spoke to me is to not use Christian commentaries. Because if I'm trying to break that cycle and that mindset, I can't do it if I'm continually doing the same things. It's like a cleanse. Whenever you're doing a cleanse and you're cleansing your body, even if you wash your car, you don't use dirty water, you use clean water. Are you following? You don't use the same stuff that made your car dirty to make it clean. You use something totally different.
Yes, right.
So it's the same thing when we are walking in truth. We have to use information and literature that is going to support our way of life. And you're not going to find it in books that Calvin wrote. You're not going to find it in books that John Wesley wrote. You're not going to find this way of life in books that Beth Moore wrote. You're not going to find this in their books.
Right.
Creflo Dollar, Bishop Jakes. You're not going to find that in their books. Why? Because their whole purpose in promoting and pushing Christianity is to make us believe that there is a new way, and there is not a new way. It is the same way under better conditions. Are y'all following me? Under better conditions. So this is important that we understand this. And so this is what they did. And so using certain commentaries, and this is even what we have to be careful with using commentaries where we believe, because it says Jewish or it says Hebrew on it, that it is the best. Right. You have to even go through and go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that it does not come against the belief system that we are building or that you are building in this way of life.
That's right.
It's very important. All information is not great information. Just like all seeds are not great seeds just because it's a seed.
That's right.
That's right.
it's important to understand the seed that you have. GMO seeds are not great seeds.
No.
And you can buy them a dime a dozen. Genetically modified seeds. You can buy them a dime a dozen. But because it's a seed doesn't mean that it's a great seed and doesn't mean that it's going to produce healthy vegetation or fruit. You have to know where the seed comes from in order to determine what it's going to produce. Same thing with commentaries. We have to know who wrote them, where did they come from, in order to understand and truly be able to rely wholeheartedly on what they're saying to determine whether or not what they are giving us is healthy and important, very important for us.
Okay.
All right, now listen. Behold, my servant Yasharal shall understand. He shall be exalted, extolled, and raised very high at the coming of the Mashiach. As many of the nations were astonished at thee, O Yasharal, saying at the time of the captivity, truly he is disfigured above all mankind in his countenance and form. His insertion of the terms Yasharal, nations, and Mashiach at the appropriate points. Listen, not only has equated Yasharal with the Mashiach, but also has distinguished the Gentiles as those in need of Yasharal's redemption. Put words here, put words there. It changes up everything. Are you following me?
Yes.
And this is how we have gotten where we are. Change it up. Same thing. Move, you want to cause an accident, remove a stop sign. You want to cause tragedy, remove guardrails for the train. Because you're going to have some smart person always trying to beat the train. Remove certain things and you're going to cause havoc. So it's important that we understand these things. Are y'all hearing me?
Yes.
Now, the summary to this, I'm going to read this and then we're going to pray. This view that Yasharal's servant refers to the nation of Yasharal in whole or in part dominated the medieval period, ancient and medieval period. However, this view did not spring up entirely within the Middle Ages. It did not have forerunners in the ancient period, as Jeremias points out, though a minority view. The collective view did exist in the Palestinian and Hellenistic Judaism. Also, Origen gives early testimony to the collective interpretation when he states, I remember once having used these prophecies in distinguishing with those who call wise among the Jews or the Ibram, whereon said that those or these things were prophesied of the whole people as one, which was both dispersed abroad and smitten. So when you start putting things out there, the basis for putting it out there is to constantly keep a foundation to your theories and your views. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, it should also be understood that the collective view did not entirely replace the Mashiach view during the Middle Ages. Driver and Nebar noted that throughout the Middle Ages, there are those who still interpreted the section of the Mashiach, and among them it is remarkable that Maimonides retained herein the simple belief of his forefathers. Interpreting of the Mashiach, the words, he came up as a sucker, that is, as well as the glories at him, kings will shut their mouths. Ibn Ezra also gives testimony to the existence of the Mashiach interpretation in the Middle Ages. He observes many explain it of the Mashiach on the authority of a traditional saying of the rabbis. The principal interpretation of Yashia's servant in and following the Middle Ages is the collective view, foretold or fostered, and expounded by Rashi, expanded and proliferated by those who followed him. The collectivist view of the servant displaced the Mashiach view of the ancient period and still holds sway within the interpretation to this very day. Are y'all hearing me?
Yes.
All right. Let us see the other movie. All right. Reasons behind the rise of the collective view. In other words, why was it that the collective view was able to overpower the individualistic view? This is why. Although Rashi gave impetus to the collectivist view in medieval times, his personal influence does not fully explain the rise of this view. His champion of this view was in the context of a number of factors which dominated the times and environment which he lived. To a large degree, the collectivist view became prominent because of the environment of medieval political, intellectual, and social influences, particularly as they affected Rashi. Rambam mentions four justifications of the collective interpretation of Yashaya's servant. These are proposed by a Funkenstein and the fourth by Ibn Ezra. Funkenstein has suggested that in their attempts to find meaning in their suffering in exile, Ibram developed three different interpretations of their experience. One, the cathartic, the missionary, and the soteriological. According to the cathartic, the suffering is a means to expediting Yasharal's own transgressions. Cathartic, thank you, cathartic. The missionary understanding defines the exile or exilic dispersion as a necessary step in Yahuwah's plan to bring Torah to the nations. Now remember, these are the three interpretations of their experiences. The cathartic, that's how you say it, the cathartic? The cathartic. Yes. Cathartic. Thank you. The cathartic, the missionary, and the soteriological. These are their three meanings. The soteriological conceives of Yasharal's suffering as affording atonement for the very nations who are Yasharal's persecutors. Ibn Ezra refers to yet a fourth meaning that he and others find in the Ibram suffering at the hands of the nations. The nations inflict pain on the Ibram is a transgression that justifies their being punished by Yahuwah. We can term this view of the exilic suffering retaliatory. Retaliatory. Rambam's justifications for the collective view suggest a number of possible causes that might have affected medieval understanding of the servant songs. Three areas need to be investigated concerning the rise of the collective view to a position of dominance. Once again, why did these things come about? First, we're going to look at the hermeneutics. Let's look at that real quick. Hermeneutics. And anytime you know anything about Christianity, when people go to theological school, they learn hermeneutics. I think I'm saying it right. Homiletics. They learn how to preach and teach the Bible. Are you following?
Yes.
They learn how to do these things. Hermeneutics. It should be pointed out from the beginning that Rashi's departure from the messianic view. Now remember, he departed from this view. Why? Because he did not want the people coming under attack. Was not exegetically based. Early in his career and his writings, Rashi held to the Mashiach view. So at first he held to the Mashiach view. Same as we do. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Yes. You start digging so deep and digging and digging and digging that now you don't get to bedrock. You go past the bedrock and you start thinking there has to be something more. Are y'all following me?
Yes.
Barron points out that when Rashi wrote his commentary on the Talmud, he actually followed the older interpretation, which applied Yashiyah to the Mashiach. Bernard, 53, Bernard Wembury seems to suggest that Rashi synthesized a hermeneutical method of his own, which at least allowed him to substantiate his collectivist view in spite of ancient interpretations. Remember, these are Hebrew or Ibram interpretations. Rambam, in a footnote, apparently allows for such an understanding, he observes. One might be inclined to suggest that Rashi's unique interpretation simply flowed out of the plain meaning of the Isaianic passage. However, the language of Yashiyah 53 sufficiently obscure so as to lend itself to a variety of interpretations. And in fact, most Jewish, when we say Jewish, you know what I mean, commentators who, like Rashi, were sensitive to the Peshat of the Bible, chose not to understand the servant suffering of Yashiyah 53 per se, cannot be said to be determined factors in Rashi's interpretation. So you see all this stuff that goes on? Mm-hmm. You have commentators looking at other people's commentators. Not only that, they're trying to get an understanding of why he did what he did, knowing in the beginning he accepted this, but then along the lines, he changed it. Mm-hmm. He changed it. Now, Rashi's collectivist position thus did not arise from previous instruction or previously accepted exegetical methods. Apparently, it did not rise from an uninfluenced study of Yashiyah's servant songs. The implication is that Rashi's methods were subservient to Rashi's view of Yashiyah's servant in light of the political and social influences around him. So, once again, it's important that we understand how we can be influenced by those around us. Right. And this is why we ought to always remain with that set apart mentality. Mm-hmm. We know that we are living in perilous times, as Timotheus said. We're living in perilous times. But because we are living in perilous times does not mean that now we have to digress in any way to meet the need or to combat the things that are going on. Nowhere should we ever try to go below the radar to keep other people from understanding what was given to us. Right. Nowhere should we ever let what's going on, and we know in the White House and in other places, it's a mess. But nowhere should we ever try to bring about a diversion to the context that's been given. Nowhere should we ever bring about a change that was not given to us by Yahuwah or approved of by Yahuwah through Yahush to bring about such a drastic change because of what's going on. We know today people don't believe that we are the people. But do we go through drastic measures like that in order to make people believe? Do we go or take those type of measures in order to maintain a position so that we can basically change the opinion of the populace? Absolutely not. It is important that we understand, how we are to govern ourselves and how we are to accept what he's given unto us in spite of what's going on in the time that we live in. Okay. Nowhere should you ever try to change, modify, or distort truth because of somebody else's perception of it. Mm-hmm. If they want to say that Yahush was Jesus, let them say all day long, but continue to refute it. Okay. If they continue to be combative and say, but Jesus is black and so they are the same people, they continue to do that. You continue to say he's not. It's not the same person. Yes. But never go in and change and try to distort the truth to keep somebody else from getting it and being able to understand it or use it for themselves. Right. Never ever do that, because when you do, you cause trouble. Now here we are in the millennial, right? We're in the millennial. We're in a new time, new dispensation, right? Yes. And so with that being said, as we are in this new time, we have to bring about correction that has been going on for a very, very, very long time. And you have to understand why now it's important, because we are finally coming into the truth that was denied us so many years because of erroneous teachings. And soon as we get into this teaching and we get into this new way of life, the first thing we're hit at is accepting, number one, the Brit Hadasha. And if you reject the Brit Hadasha, then you reject Yahushua the Mashiach. And you have so many people that have on their wall and on their pages on Facebook, and it seemed like this is where we really find so many of them on social media. I don't believe in the New Testament. It's not the New Testament. It is the renewed covenant. Right. You have many of them that will blatantly say, I don't believe, I'm not a believer, and if you believe, you are a fool. You have to understand where this comes from. Mm-hmm. And so what he did, it is up to us to bring about a awareness of truth. Give people what they need to intelligently be able to accept or reject. Now they're only following and basing things, I believe, based upon only the information that is negatively spoken of concerning this. And what I mean by negatively, altered, to say that it's representing, or this is being that this is speaking of the children of Yasharal and not of the Mashiach. So I pray on this Layla that Abba Yahuwah will continue to lead and guide us and continue to open up truth unto our hearts and continue to give us the understanding to know. Because you have to understand, this is why many of them, this is why Yehukanan was placed on the Isle of Patmos, because he fought for the witness and the ministry of Yahush, our Mashiach, being the son of Yahuwah, and that he was flesh and he was blood and he was of the water. He fought this, and this is why they basically outcast him, because he would not let go. Gnosticism came in, and people began to say, "Oh, he was not flesh and blood. He was only flesh and water," which would have made him a deity. And so it's a lot that has gone into that. So it's important for us to understand our position and now. And this is why we don't have time to be bickering and fussing with each other. We need to be praying and truly be asking Abba Yahuwah to give us knowledge and understanding to undo, if at all possible, undo the very erroneous teachings, false doctrines, and present truth so that people can walk in it. And if nothing else, if people still reject, at least give them an option to look and say, if you didn't see both views, there's no way you can tell me intelligently that you just rejected it and you saw both views of this. Let's look at it on both sides. And then from there, if you still are driven and headstrong about not following, don't follow. But look at both sides of the information before you just choose to jump ship and say, oh, he doesn't exist. I believe he exists. Yes. And I believe that if he didn't have us, many of us would be gone. Yes. But we appreciate him for his heart. Once again, keep your head up, keep your shoulders squared, and keep your heart and your feet in and upon the Torah, because you can't go wrong when you walk in truth. I want you to remember that I am Aliyah Yasharal, and I am the leader of Messengers of Yahuwah's Kingdom of Break Belief Ministries, located in South Carolina. I want you to remember here at Messengers of Yahuwah's Kingdom of Break Belief Ministries, this is the place where
the Torah does the body excellent.
Until next time, may Abba Yahuwah Baruch Atah and keep you in his shalom until we meet again. Also, I want you to remember that you've been touched by Champion TV, a place where the champions reside. And it is so.
And it is so.
This is Champion